A caveman crouched by a fire 30,000 years ago suddenly jerked, and a small, ridiculous sound jumped out of him. Hic, the exact sound you make. We've wiped out smallpox, split the atom, and parked machines on Mars, and yet this one tiny spasm has outsmarted every human who ever lived, including you. And the reason why has almost nothing to do with your lungs, and everything to do with a body you stopped having 370 million years ago. Go back 30,000 years and sit by that fire. The hunter beside you is worn out, his shoulders finally loose, and then his chest jerks all on its own. Hic. A tiny, undignified sound, long before anyone had a word for it. Now here is what should stop you cold. That sound is exactly the one you make. Over 30,000 years, almost nothing about the human body stayed identical. This did. The hiccup is the single part of you that has not changed since before history began, and no one, then or now, has ever truly turned it off. To understand why it is unbeatable, you have to travel back much further than any caveman, to a time before humans had lungs at all. Roughly 370 million years ago, your ancestors were not people. They were fish, slick, gilled things that pushed water in and out by slamming a flap shut to force it back through. Scientists who study the hiccup think it is that exact motion, fossilized into your nervous system and never deleted. Picture the oldest room deep in your skull, the door shut for ages, the lights still burning inside. A program keeps running in there, quietly, one written for a body built to breathe water. You stopped being that animal hundreds of millions of years back. The program never got the message. Here is the machine itself. A spark races down two nerves, your diaphragm snaps downward, and a few milliseconds later your vocal cords clap shut. Hic. In a grown adult, it accomplishes nothing. It does not help you digest. It does not protect you. It is a button still wired to the wall, long after someone unplugged the device on the other end. You knock it by accident, and it fires off anyway. Worse, the wiring takes a detour so absurd no engineer would ever sign off on it. The nerve that drives your diaphragm starts up in your neck, then loops the long way down through your chest to reach it. It is a leftover route from when those organs sat much higher, back in a fish. Your body never straightened it out. It just kept the ancient map and built every newer part around it, a modern house raised on top of prehistoric plumbing nobody ever dared to rip out. But a growing number of scientists think this glitch is not a glitch at all. Before you were born, you hiccuped, sometimes for the better part of an hour a day, curled up inside the womb. Researchers think the reflex was rehearsing, teaching a body that did not exist yet to seal its own airway and line up the muscles it would soon need to suckle and to breathe air. So, your very first use of this ancient motion was to learn a brand new one. You practiced being a fish in order to get ready to be a mammal, and you were not the only creature running that rehearsal. Your dog does it. Kittens do it so softly you would miss it. Rats, rabbits, horses, all of them hiccup, and it has only ever turned up in mammals, the same branch of life that nurses its young. Sit with that company for a second. The reflex rides along with every animal that ever fed its baby's milk, smuggled down through the generations like a stowaway from a shared ancestor. None of us remember. But the clearest fingerprint of where it came from is not in a mammal at all. Watch a tadpole turning into a frog. To switch between gills and lungs, it uses a hiccup-like reflex, gulping water toward the gills, air toward the lungs, slamming a little flap shut between each switch. Look closely and you are watching, live, in a pond, the exact thing your hiccup used to be. Not a stand-in for it. The thing itself, still doing its original job inside a body small enough to hold in your palm, which means your hiccup was never really about your lungs. So here is the twist. The hiccup is not a breathing motion gone wrong. It is a gill-closing motion with nowhere left to go. That hic is your body slamming a door that stopped existing 300 million years gone, slamming it perfectly, on cue, for absolutely no reason. You have been calling it a breathing hiccup your entire life. You were wrong about what your own body was even doing. If the reflex is this ancient, then the war against it has to be ancient too, and it is. 24 centuries ago, at a famous dinner party staged in Plato's pages, a guest named Aristophanes gets the hiccup so badly he cannot deliver his speech. A physician at the table hands him the fix. Hold your breath, gargle some water, and if that fails, tickle your nose until you sneeze. Read that list again. Those are the same tricks sitting in your own head right now, the exact ones you would reach for tonight. And he was not even the first doctor to write them down. Hippocrates, the father of medicine himself, had already logged it. Force a sneeze and you can shake a hiccup loose. 25 centuries later, doctors still admit the sneeze trick sometimes works, and they still cannot fully explain why. The oldest prescription on the books is one we somehow never managed to improve on. The Romans, though, blamed something far stranger than your nose. Roman physicians had a different theory entirely. They decided hiccups came from powerful feelings, from fright, grief, a sudden shock to the system. So they fought fire with fire and tried to scare the hiccup straight out of you, half wrong, half right. A real jolt of fear genuinely can reset the reflex. They had the cause backwards, but their hands were on the right lever. But in the cold and dark of early medieval Europe, the explanation stopped being about the body at all. The Anglo-Saxons had a name for it, Elf Sogatha, elf hiccup. They were convinced that elves shot you with tiny invisible darts, and that each hiccup was one of them landing. Their thousand-year-old medical book, Bald's Leech Book, even files hiccups by cause: a stomach too cold, a stomach too hot, too much food, or simply evil spirits. Real physicians sorting a reflex into folklore. Their cures, though, land weirdly close to yours. All across medieval Europe, the remedies rhyme with ours. Say it out loud. Get a friend to frighten you. Feel a hot flush of embarrassment. Hold your breath and wait it out. None of it was random superstition. Through nothing but 1,000 years of trial and error, people had stumbled onto the truth that a sharp shock to the system breaks the loop, without the faintest idea why it worked. Then science arrived, and science, it turns out, was doing the very same thing, just in a lab coat. 1971, the New England Journal of Medicine. A doctor feeds 20 hiccuping patients a single spoonful of dry, granulated sugar. 19 of them stop almost on the spot. The grit does the rest, flooding the nerve endings at the back of the throat and overloading the very same vagus nerve the cave dwellers had been jamming by accident with their gargles and their frights. And the most modern cure of all is just that same idea, with a patent stamped on it. Jump ahead to 2021. A rigid plastic straw with a brand name, Hiccup, gets tested on 290 people. You suck hard against it and swallow at the very same instant, and it shut the hiccups down in about 92% of them. The reason is almost funny once you hear it. It forces your phrenic and vagus nerves to fire together, the exact two ancient nerves sitting dead center of the whole reflex, which finally drags the punchline out from under 2,400 years of cures. Line them all up. Plato's gargle, the elf charms, the spoon of sugar, the plastic straw, every cure in all of recorded history does one identical thing. It hijacks the phrenic or the vagus nerve to interrupt the loop. The ancients were never primitive about this. They were aiming straight at the right wiring, in total darkness, 2,000 years before anyone could even give that wiring a name. But sometimes the ancient switch does not reset. Sometimes it just jams. In 1922, an Iowa farmer named Charles Osborne hoisted a 350-pound hog, slipped, and went down hard. Something tore, a tiny vessel deep in his brainstem, right where the hiccup switch lives. He started hiccuping. He did not stop for 68 years, an estimated 430 million times. In between, he married twice, raised 8 children, taught himself to swallow the sound so people barely noticed, and then one ordinary day in 1990, with no warning at all, it simply quit. His body was not broken in some exotic way. It just could not shut off the oldest reflex you own. That is the quiet morning folded inside a silly little noise. Hiccups that drag on past 48 hours can be the first signal of a stroke, a tumor, or nerve damage, because that switch is bolted into the most primitive floor of your brain. Sit with that. The thing that ties you to a tadpole shares a room with the machinery that keeps you breathing. Poke one, and you are right next door to the other, which leaves one last, strange thought about the little sound in your chest. Every person who has ever lived got ambushed by this. The caveman at his fire, the philosopher at his feast, the farmer in his field, you on the couch tonight, and you cannot cure it for the same reason you cannot cure your own history, because it was never a malfunction. It is a memory. A small, involuntary echo of a body that once breathed underwater, still rehearsing a motion it forgot the meaning of, inside a creature that crawled out of the sea and forgot it ever lived there. So the next time your chest kicks and that ridiculous little sound jumps out of you, listen closely. That is not your body failing. That is your body remembering.